Our mortgage company had no trouble finding the address. The county assessor had no trouble finding it. The title was clean. The deed was recorded. But the insurance company's system returned our farmhouse as a vacant parcel. No structure. No dwelling. We'd been living there for 5 months. I should explain how we got here. My name is Ethan Pruitt. My wife is Dana. Our daughter, Clementine, Clem, was 6 when we bought the farmhouse on Boxelder Road in Harlan Hollow, Braxton County, West Virginia. We moved from Silver Spring, Maryland, in October of last year, after I'd been working remotely for 2 full years and Dana's physical therapy practice transitioned to a model where she only needed to be in office twice a month. We'd been talking about land since before Clem was born. Not a vacation property. Not a weekend place. We wanted acreage, quiet, a real kitchen garden, a childhood for Clem that looked like something we'd both read about but never experienced. We found the listing on a site aggregating rural properties. 87 acres. A 2-story farmhouse built in 1931 with a standing seam metal roof replaced in 2004. 2 outbuildings, a hay barn and what the listing described as a smokehouse, though it hadn't been used for smoking in decades. The photographs showed white clapboard siding, a deep front porch with turnposts, and a view down a hollow that ended in a tree line so dense it looked like a wall. The asking price was $91,000. We drove down on a Saturday and met the listing agent, a man named Garnett Hayes who operated out of Sutton. He was in his 60s, unhurried, and familiar with the property in a way that suggested history rather than salesmanship. He told us the house had been in the Combs family for 3 generations and had been vacant for 14 months following the death of the last occupant, a woman named Liddy Combs, who'd lived there alone for the final 11 years of her life. The house was solid. That was the first thing I noticed. The foundation was native sandstone, dry-laid but tight. The framing was oak, you could see it where the plaster had cracked in the upstairs hallway, and the floors were poplar, worn smooth but unwarped. The kitchen had been updated sometime in the mid-90s, laminate counters, a propane range, a deep single-basin sink. The well house was 30 feet from the back door, and the well itself had been drilled to 240 feet in 1987. Septic was a conventional gravity system, field lines running downslope into the lower pasture. Garnett had the inspection reports. Everything passed. Dana loved the porch. Clem loved the barn. I loved the price and the silence and the cellular signal that, improbably, came through clear from a tower on the ridge above us. We put in an offer that afternoon. Closing was in late September. We moved in on October 11th. The first 3 weeks were exactly what we'd imagined. I set up my office in the 2nd bedroom upstairs, facing the hollow. Dana built raised beds along the south side of the house using lumber from the barn. Clem started 1st grade at Braxton County Elementary, a 40-minute bus ride each way, and came home every afternoon talking about a girl named Darcy and a creek behind the school where they'd found a crawdad the size of a hot dog. The hollow itself held 6 other residences spread across roughly 1.5 miles of gravel road. The nearest was the Felton Place, about a 1/4 mile downhill, a ranch-style house with a metal roof and a yard full of bantam chickens. Beyond that were the Harpers, the Kinnemans, the Stidham family, and, at the very end of the road near the tree line, a single-wide trailer belonging to a man named Virgil Coates, who we didn't meet for several weeks. It was Burl Felton who came to us first. He showed up on our 4th Saturday, walking up the gravel with a quart jar of sourwood honey and a posture that communicated both friendliness and purpose. He was maybe 70. Thin. clean-shaven. Wore a canvas coat and a feed cap that said Southern States. He introduced himself, gave Dana the honey, complimented the raised beds, and asked Clem her name with the kind of seriousness that children recognize as respect. Then he asked if we'd been told about the property. Dana looked at me. I said Garnett had walked us through everything, the well, the septic, the roof, the boundaries. Burl nodded like that was the expected answer. Then he said, carefully, that there were a few things about living in the hollow that didn't show up in an inspection. He wasn't dramatic about it. He spoke the way a neighbor speaks when they're explaining that the road floods at the low crossing in April, or that the power company won't send a truck past the second cattle gate. Practical. Local knowledge. The first thing he told us was about the tree line. The hollow terminated about 600 yards past Virgil Coates's trailer in a dense stand of old-growth hardwood, oak, hickory, tulip poplar, that climbed steeply up the hollow's back wall. The trees were on our property. 87 acres meant the parcel extended well past the tree line and up the ridge. But Burl said that no one in the hollow went past the trees. Not couldn't. Not shouldn't. Just didn't. He said it plainly. The timber line's been there since before the Combses. You'll see there's no path through it. Nobody cuts wood from it. Your girl shouldn't play past it. I asked why. He looked at me for a moment, then said, it's not a danger. There's just nothing back there for you. The second thing was about the smokehouse. The listing had mentioned it as an outbuilding, and I'd been inside it during the walkthrough, a small, square structure about 12 by 12, with a packed earth floor and blackened rafters. It had a heavy plank door with wrought iron hardware that looked original to the building, and a hasp fitted for a padlock, though no lock was present. Burl said we should keep the smokehouse door closed. Not locked. Just closed. He said it didn't need to be maintained or cleaned out. Just left shut. Liddy kept it shut, he said. Her mother kept it shut. It's not a storage building. Dana asked what it was, then. Burl said, it's a smokehouse, as if the question had answered itself, and moved on. The third thing was about nighttime. He said that between November and March, we should be inside the house by full dark. Not for safety in the conventional sense, not because of animals or terrain or road conditions. He said the hollow settled after dark in the cold months, and that the settling was best experienced from inside a house with the doors closed. You'll hear it, he said. Sounds like the ground breathing. Liddy said it was the hollow dreaming. I don't know what it is. I know I'm inside by dark from November to March, and I've been here 46 years. He said all of this in about 10 minutes, standing on our porch, and then he talked about the weather and the best place to get propane and whether Clem liked fishing. After he left, Dana and I stood in the kitchen and tried to decide how to feel. He's an old man in a holler, Dana said. This is what they do. They tell you the local lore. I agreed. I mostly agreed. But I noticed, over the next 2 weeks, that I kept the smokehouse door closed without thinking about it. Not out of fear. Out of something more like etiquette. The Harpers came by the following weekend. Glenda Harper was maybe 55, a retired school bus driver with a direct manner and a laugh that carried. Her husband Boyd stayed in the truck. Glenda brought a casserole and a stack of Clem's school papers that had apparently been sent home with the wrong child. She stayed for coffee. She said she was glad the house had people in it again. She said Liddy had been a good neighbor but a private woman, and that the last few years before her death, she'd barely come off the porch. Then Glenda said something that didn't match what Burl had told us. She said the smokehouse should be kept open. Not closed. Open. It needs to breathe, she said. Always has. The Combses kept it propped open with a river stone. Liddy changed that toward the end, but Liddy changed a lot of things toward the end. I told her Burl had said to keep it closed. Glenda looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hostile. Not amused. Something closer to calibration, like she was deciding how much to adjust based on what I'd just revealed. Burl's particular, she said. He and Liddy disagreed about the smokehouse for 30 years. I wouldn't worry about it either way. She left shortly after. I walked down to the smokehouse and stood in front of it. The door was closed, the way I'd been keeping it. The iron hardware was cold. The wood smelled like decades of creosote and rain. I left it closed. That night, I mentioned the contradiction to Dana while Clem was in the bath. Dana shrugged. Small communities, she said. Everyone's got their version. She was right. I knew she was right. But I started paying attention to the way the Hollow's residents talked to us, and I noticed something that took shape slowly, over the course of November. Everyone gave us instructions. And no two sets matched. Mary Kinnaman, who came by with a pie on election day, told us never to leave standing water near the house after dark. She said it drew attention, and that Liddy had been careful about it. She said to dump the dog's water bowl, cover the rain barrel, even drain the bird bath if we had one. But when Walt Stidham helped me fix the gate on the lower pasture the following Saturday, he mentioned, offhandedly, as if it were obvious, that we should always keep a bowl of water on the porch. For the Hollow, he said, the way you'd say, for the birds. I asked him what he meant. It's a courtesy, he said. Like leaving a light on. I told him Mary Kinnaman had said the opposite. Walt didn't react the way Glenda had. He didn't recalibrate. He just looked at me steadily and said, Mary's from Gilmer County. She married in. She doesn't have the history here. That was the first time I heard that framing. History. Not as in what happened before, but as in how deep your root structure goes. The Hollow had a hierarchy, and it was organized around duration. How long your family had been in the Hollow determined not just your social standing but your credibility on matters of practice. Burl Felton's family had been there 4 generations. The Harpers, 3. The Stidhams, 2. Mary Kinnaman, 1, by marriage. Virgil Coates, at the end of the road, had been there longest of all. His family predated the Combses. Predated the road. His grandfather had been born in a cabin on the ridge above the tree line, which meant the Coates family had once lived in the area everyone now agreed you shouldn't enter. We didn't meet Virgil until late November. By then, I had accumulated a small, contradictory archive of instructions from the Hollow's residents. I'd started writing them down, not out of superstition, but because the pattern interested me. I'm a graphic designer. I organize information for a living. The contradictions weren't random. They had a structure. Some instructions were universal. Everyone agreed on 3 points: don't go past the tree line, be inside by dark in winter, and don't bring strangers to the Hollow without introducing them first. That last one wasn't phrased as a rule. It was phrased as manners. But it was consistent across every household. Everything else, the smokehouse, the water, the matter of whether you should or shouldn't burn wood from fallen trees on the property, whether the upstairs windows should be open or closed at night, whether Clem should or shouldn't walk the road alone, was disputed. And the disputes weren't casual. They were deeply held. Each household delivered their version with the same certainty, the same embedded implication that this was simply how things were done. I made a chart. I'm not proud of that, but I did it. I used a spreadsheet and organized the instructions by household, by subject, and by agreement or conflict. When I was finished, I had 41 discrete instructions from 6 households, of which only 12 were unanimous. The contradictions made me feel safe. That's the part one need to be honest about. If the instructions had been identical, if every neighbor had delivered the same list with the same gravity, I would have been unnerved. The disagreements made the whole thing feel human. Folkloric. A community's living mythology, accumulated over generations, fractured and personalized the way all oral traditions fracture. I showed the chart to Dana. She laughed. She said I was the only person who'd moved to Appalachia and immediately tried to build a database of superstitions. Virgil Coates appeared on our porch on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. He didn't knock. I came downstairs at 6:15 in the morning to start coffee and saw him through the kitchen window, sitting in one of the porch chairs, facing the hollow. He was somewhere between 75 and 90, the kind of old where precision stops mattering. He wore denim overalls and a wool coat and boots that had been resoled more than once. His face was sharp-boned and clean, and his eyes were the pale gray-blue that runs in certain mountain families like a watermark. I opened the door. He looked at me without surprise. "You're the Pruitts," he said. I said we were. "Liddy's house suits you. The girl especially." I asked if he'd like coffee. He said he would. He followed me into the kitchen and sat at the table while I made it, and he didn't speak again until I'd set the cup in front of him. Then he said, "They've all been up here talking to you." I said they had. "And they've all told you different things." I said that was true. Virgil wrapped both hands around the mug. His fingers were long and knobbed and steady. "The instructions aren't wrong," he said. "None of them. They're all correct. They're just not for the same thing." I waited. Burrell's rules keep the hollow calm. Glenda's rules keep the hollow fed. Walt's rules keep the hollow growing. Mary's rules keep the hollow contained. He took a sip of coffee. "This property is where they overlap. That's why the Combses built here. It's the only parcel in the hollow where all 4 functions meet. Whoever lives here has to do all 4, and the instructions for each one contradict the others." I sat down across from him. The kitchen was cold. The furnace hadn't kicked on yet. Through the window, the hollow was still dark, the tree line a black wall against the barely graying sky. "So which ones do we follow?" I asked. Virgil set the mug down. "All of them. They contradict each other." "Yes. You can't keep the smokehouse open and closed." "You can't," he agreed. "But the house can." Liddy figured that out. Her mother figured it out before her. You open it when the hollow needs air. You close it when the hollow needs quiet. You learn the timing. How? By living here. He said it without mysticism. He said it the way a farmer says you learn soil by working it. Not revelation. Accumulation. He stayed for 20 minutes. He didn't give me a single additional instruction. What he gave me instead was a framework, the idea that the hollow was not a passive landscape but an active system, and that the 6 households were not performing superstitions but maintenance. Each family maintained one aspect of the hollow's function, and our property, at the convergence point, was where the maintenance interlocked. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at my spreadsheet and understood, for the first time, that I hadn't been collecting folklore. I'd been given an operations manual, distributed across 6 sources, with no single source holding the complete picture. I should have been frightened. I want to be clear about that. A rational person, hearing what Virgil told me, should have felt the ground shift under them. But I'd been living in the hollow for 6 weeks by then, and the hollow had been doing something to me that I hadn't yet named. I felt competent. I felt situated. I felt, for the first time in my adult life, like I was in the correct place. That feeling is what I'm most afraid of now. December arrived, and we followed the rules. All of them. I opened the smokehouse at dawn and closed it at dusk. I kept a bowl of water on the porch and emptied any standing water near the foundation before dark. I didn't burn fallen timber from the property. I kept the upstairs windows cracked during the day and sealed them at night. I made sure we were inside by full dark, which in December meant by 5:30. And the hollow responded. That's the only way I can describe it. The response wasn't dramatic. It wasn't supernatural in any way I could point to and say, "There, that's impossible." It was cumulative and environmental, and it affected everything without being visible in any single thing. The well water tasted better in December than it had in October. Not chemically, I had it tested, and the mineral content was identical. But the taste was different. Fuller. Cleaner. Like the water had been paying attention to who was drinking it. The house stayed warm on less propane than the first month's consumption would have predicted. I tracked our usage because I'm meticulous about that kind of thing. We used 31% less propane in December than in November, despite December being colder by an average of 9 degrees. Clem slept through the night every night. She'd been a restless sleeper since she was a toddler, up once or twice, sometimes 3 times, asking for water, asking for a story, asking for the hall light. In December, she slept from 8 to 6:30 without a sound. Every night. And the hollow settled. Burl had warned us about this. He'd said we'd hear it, the ground breathing, Liddy's phrase. The first time it happened was December 3rd, about an hour after full dark. Dana and I were on the couch reading, Clem already asleep upstairs. The sound came from below and around us simultaneously. Not a vibration. Not a hum. A slow, tidal compression of air pressure that lasted about 4 seconds, then released. Like the hollow inhaled once and held it and then let go. It happened every night after that. Always once. Always about an hour after dark. Always the same duration. Dana looked at me the first time and said, "Furnace?" I said no. The furnace was electric ignition propane. It didn't cycle that way. The second time, she didn't say anything. By the third time, she'd stopped reacting to it entirely. So had I. By mid-December, I realized I'd stopped questioning the instructions and started interpreting them. When the temperature dropped sharply, I'd close the smokehouse earlier. When the air was heavy and still, I'd leave it open longer. I wasn't following a schedule. I was reading the hollow and adjusting, the way Virgil had said I would. I wasn't afraid. That's the thing I keep returning to. I should have been afraid, and I wasn't. The hollow was asking something of us, and we were providing it, and the exchange felt fair. It felt, if anything, like homeownership was supposed to feel, like tending something that tended you back. Christmas was the best one we'd had. Clem made ornaments from pine cones and wire. Dana cooked a turkey in the propane oven and it came out perfect despite neither of us having cooked a turkey before. Burl brought over a smoked ham. The Harpers dropped off a plate of cookies. Even Virgil sent something, a small jar of clear liquid with a handwritten label that said hollow water, which I assumed was moonshine and which Dana and I drank on New Year's Eve. It was the sweetest, smoothest thing I've ever tasted, and I slept 12 hours after 2 sips. January was when things changed. Not because the hollow changed. Because I received an email. It was from the insurance company. We'd filed a routine homeowner's claim for minor water damage in the basement, a seep along the south wall during a heavy rain in late December. The damage was cosmetic, staining on the drywall, a small amount of mold on the baseboard. The claim was for $1,100. The denial came on January 9th. Claim denied. Reason: structure not present at declared address. Parcel 14-0023-0087-0000 is recorded as vacant land. No dwelling, no insurable interest. I called the insurance company. I was transferred 3 times. The final representative pulled up the parcel record on her screen and told me what she saw: 87 acres of unimproved land, no structures, no residential history. I said I was standing inside the house right now. She said the system showed otherwise. I called Garnett Hayes, the listing agent. He answered on the second ring. I explained the situation. He was quiet for a moment, then asked me to read him the parcel number. I did. "That's your parcel," he said. "I sold it to you. The deed's recorded. Something's wrong on their end." I asked if this had ever happened before. The pause before he answered was longer than it should have been. "The Combses never had insurance," he said. Liddy didn't believe in it. Her mother didn't either. I don't think the properties ever had a policy. I told him that seemed unusual for a house that had been continuously occupied since 1931. "Lots of things about that property are unusual," he said. "That's not the same as wrong." I pulled the county assessor's records online. The parcel was there. The tax assessment included the dwelling. Appraised value of the structure, $44,000. The county recognized the house. I pulled up the state's GIS mapping tool. Satellite imagery showed the property clearly: the house, the barn, the smokehouse, the road, the tree line. I tried a different mapping service. Google Earth. Our parcel showed the barn, the smokehouse, the road, the tree line. But where the house should have been, there was only grass. I zoomed in. The resolution was clear enough to see individual fence posts. The barn threw a shadow. The smokehouse threw a shadow. The driveway led up to a flat, open patch of lawn with no structure on it. I checked the imagery date. It was from the previous April. 6 months before we moved in. The house should have been there. Liddy had died the previous August. The house had been standing, occupied, for 92 years. But on the satellite image, it simply wasn't. I showed Dana. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she said, "Imagery errors happen all the time. They stitch photos together from different passes. Sometimes buildings get erased in the compositing." She was right. That does happen. I've read about it. Artifacts of automated image processing. But the barn was there. The smokehouse was there. The driveway led to nothing. I checked the county GIS again. Their imagery, sourced differently, updated on a different schedule, showed the house. I toggled between the two. County, house present. Google, house absent. Same parcel. Same coordinates. I spent the rest of that evening trying to find any other image source that showed the house from above. The USDA's Aerial Photography Archive had a pass from 2019. House present. The state's broadband mapping initiative had included a flyover in 2021. House present. A commercial real estate satellite feed I accessed through a free trial showed imagery from 2023. House absent. The pattern wasn't chronological. It wasn't that the house disappeared after a certain date. The 2019 image showed it. The 2021 image showed it. The 2023 image didn't. The county's own current imagery showed it. Google's current imagery didn't. The house was visible to some systems and invisible to others. And there was no way to predict which. I didn't sleep well that night. The hollow settled at its usual time, and for the first time, the sound bothered me. Not because it was different. Because I heard it differently. The compression, the slow release, it sounded, for the first time, like something large adjusting its grip. In February, I started testing boundaries. I didn't stop following the instructions. I want to be clear about that. I kept the smokehouse on its rhythm. I kept the water protocols. I kept us inside by dark. But alongside the compliance, I started probing. I ordered a drone. A small one, consumer grade, with a decent camera. On a clear Saturday morning, I flew it straight up from the front yard to about 400 feet and took photographs looking down. The house was there. In my drone's photographs, taken from directly above, the house was fully visible. The roof, the porch, the chimney shadow. I uploaded the images to 3 different cloud services. On 2 of them, the house appeared in the photographs. On the 3rd, a platform that ran automatic image processing and geographic tagging, the house was absent from the processed version, though visible in the raw upload. The processing was removing it. Not deliberately. There was no conspiracy. The algorithm that cleaned, sharpened, and tagged the image was treating the house as an artifact, the same way it might remove lens flare or a passing bird. The software's model of what should be at those coordinates did not include a house, so when it encountered one, it corrected for it. The house was real. I was standing in it. But it fell outside certain systems' models of reality, and those systems resolved the discrepancy by removing the house rather than updating the model. I brought this to Dana. I laid it out methodically, the insurance system, the satellite imagery, the processing algorithm. I expected her to engage with it analytically. She's smarter than I am about systems. She spent 8 years in clinical practice diagnosing movement disorders, which is essentially pattern recognition under uncertainty. She listened. She looked at the evidence. Then she said something that rearranged everything. The hollow settles every night. I said yes. It's been doing that since December. Yes. And you don't think those 2 things are related? I hadn't connected them. Or I had, but I'd filed the connection in the part of my mind that I wasn't examining. The house isn't missing from those systems, Dana said. The hollow is absorbing it. The same way it absorbs the sound at night. The same way it absorbed the propane differential and the water taste and Clem's sleep. Things that enter the hollow become part of it. And things that are part of it become invisible to things that aren't. She said this calmly. She said it the way she'd say, "The dishwasher's making that noise again." And I realized, hearing her, that the hollow had been working on her too. Not changing her mind. Deepening her comfort. Making the strangeness feel domestic. In March, Clem started talking about the tree line. Not about going past it. She'd never once tried to go past it, which, for a 6-year-old with 87 acres to explore, was itself remarkable. She talked about it the way she talked about her friends at school, with affection and familiarity. The trees were being loud today, she said at dinner one evening. I asked what she meant. Like when you can hear them thinking. When the wind isn't blowing but they're still moving. Dana looked at me. I looked at Clem. You can hear the trees thinking. I said. Not thinking. Like when you know someone's in the room even though they're not talking. That kind. She went back to her macaroni. That night, after Clem was asleep, I walked to the edge of the front porch and looked down the hollow toward the tree line. It was too dark to see it clearly, just a deeper darkness against the dark. The hollow had already settled. The air was still. I heard something I'd never heard before. Not the settling. Something underneath it, or maybe woven through it, a sound so low it was almost tactile, like standing near a transformer, but organic. Irregular. It lasted maybe 10 seconds and then faded. I went back inside. I closed the door. I sat down and opened my spreadsheet of instructions and looked at it for a long time. The spreadsheet had grown. Not because I'd added to it. Because the instructions themselves had started generating corollaries, secondary practices that emerged naturally from the primary ones. If you keep the smokehouse open during the day, you notice that certain days it should be open wider. If you maintain the water bowl on the porch, you develop a sense for when the water needs to be refreshed, not because it evaporates, but because it feels spent. If you seal the upstairs windows at night, you begin to understand that some nights they should be sealed earlier, and some nights later, and the timing has to do with a quality of the air that I can't describe except as weight. I had 63 instructions now. 41 from the neighbors. 22 I'd generated myself. And I was following all of them. April brought the insurance resolution, such as it was. I'd escalated the claim through the state insurance commissioner's office. The company sent a second adjuster. He came, confirmed the house existed, confirmed the damage, and processed the claim. We got our $1,100. But when I asked him about the first denial, the system showing a vacant parcel, he shrugged and said it was a data error. He said it happened with older rural properties that had been reparceled or had inconsistent survey histories. He said he'd flagged it for correction. I checked 3 weeks later. The system still showed a vacant parcel. The house was insured now. The claim had been paid. But the underlying record still said the house wasn't there. The policy was attached to a structure that the company's own database denied existed. Two contradictory facts living in the same system, and the system did not care. That was the moment I understood something about the hollow that I hadn't before. The hollow didn't need to be hidden. It didn't need to be secret. It didn't need to defeat the systems that failed to recognize it. It just needed the people inside it to keep doing what they were doing. The external world could deny its existence all it wanted. The denial didn't matter as long as the hollow was maintained. And we were maintaining it. May is when I tried to leave. Not permanently. I told Dana I needed to drive to Silver Spring for a client meeting, a real meeting, with a real client. But underneath the professional reason was a personal one. I wanted to know how it felt to leave the hollow. I wanted to see if the competence and comfort and situatedness I'd been feeling for 7 months survived outside the hollow's boundaries. I left on a Monday morning. Clem was at school. Dana was in the raised beds. I drove down Boxelder Road, past the Felton place, past the Harpers and the Kinnemans and the Stidhams, past Virgil's trailer, and up to the county road. The transition was immediate and physiological. By the time I reached the interstate, I felt like I'd been awake for 30 hours. My vision was sharp but my processing was slow. Everything outside the car looked flat, not visually flat, but emotionally flat, like a photograph of a place rather than the place itself. The trees along I-79 were just trees. The sky was just sky. Nothing thought. Nothing settled. Nothing breathed. I made it to Silver Spring. I took the meeting. I was professional and competent and no one noticed anything wrong. But the entire time, I felt like I was wearing a suit that didn't fit, not my clothes, but my skin. My body didn't match the environment. My breathing rhythm was wrong for the room. I kept almost hearing the settling sound, the way you almost hear a song that's been stuck in your head. I drove back the next day. When I turned onto Boxelder Road and the gravel started under my tires, the feeling reversed itself so quickly it was almost painful, like stepping into a hot bath. Everything clicked back into place. The air had weight. The trees had presence. My breathing slowed and deepened and synchronized with something I couldn't identify, and by the time I pulled into the driveway, I was crying. Not from sadness. From relief. From the overwhelming physical sensation of being returned to the correct location. Dana was on the porch. She watched me get out of the car and walk up the steps and she didn't ask me how the meeting went. She said, "It's worse if you're gone overnight." She'd tried. In November, before I'd started paying attention, she'd driven to her office for a 2-day stretch. She'd felt it. She hadn't told me because she hadn't known how to describe it, and because, she said, it sounded crazy, and I didn't want to be crazy, and then you started making the spreadsheet and I realized you already knew. We sat on the porch that evening and talked about it honestly for the first time. We were attached to the hollow. Not emotionally, or not only emotionally. Physiologically. Our bodies had calibrated to the hollow's rhythms over 7 months of residency and compliance, and leaving produced something like withdrawal. The further we went, the worse it got. The longer we stayed away, the worse it got. And returning produced something like euphoria. We could push through it, Dana said. People push through withdrawal. Could we? I don't know. Could we? Neither of us answered. June. July. Clem finished first grade. Summer opened up and she spent it in the hollow, in the barn, in the garden, in the creek that ran along the east boundary. She knew the names of every plant on the property. She knew when the smokehouse needed to be opened and when it needed to be closed. She knew it before I did. One evening in late June, I watched her walk to the porch, pick up the water bowl, dump it, refill it from the well, and set it back in its place. She was 6 years old. No one had told her to do it. No one had showed her. She felt it the way she felt hunger or thirst, as a need that arose from her body's integration with the place. I called Virgil. He answered on the 4th ring. "The hollow is training my daughter," I said. Long pause. The hollow doesn't train, he said. It accepts. Your girl has been accepted faster because she's young. Children don't resist the way adults do. They don't have a previous calibration to interfere. Is that safe? Liddy was born in that house. She lived there 83 years. She died in her bed with the smokehouse closed and a bowl of water on the porch and the windows sealed. Was that safe? She was alone for 11 years. She was never alone. She was in the hollow. I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. Can we leave? You can leave any time you want, Virgil said. The hollow doesn't hold anyone. The road goes both directions. You drive out the same way you drove in. But it hurts. Missing home always hurts. This isn't missing home. This is withdrawal. What's the difference? He hung up. August. The anniversary of our first visit. Almost a year. I'm going to describe what happened on August 14th, and I need to be precise about it because it's the reason I'm writing this, and because the precision is the only thing I have left that feels like it belongs to me rather than to the hollow. Clem was playing in the barn. Dana was inside making dinner. I was on the porch with my laptop, nominally working, actually watching the hollow do its late afternoon thing, the light thickening, the shadows pooling along the eastern wall, the tree line sharpening as the sun dropped behind the ridge. Clem came out of the barn and walked across the yard toward the tree line. Not toward it exactly. Toward the edge of the mowed area where the grass transitioned to undergrowth and the undergrowth transitioned to the first trunks of the old-growth stand. She stopped there, maybe 15 feet from the nearest tree, and stood with her hands at her sides and her face tilted up. I set the laptop down and walked toward her. When I got close, maybe 10 feet behind her, I heard it. The trees were speaking. Not in words. Not in a language. In a sound that was structured the way language is structured, with rhythm, with variation, with emphasis and pause. It came from the canopy and it came from the ground and it came from the spaces between the trunks, and it was not wind and it was not animals and it was not any phenomenon I can explain in mechanical terms. Clem was listening the way children listen to music, with her whole body. I said her name. She turned. She looked at me with an expression that I recognized because I'd felt it on my own face when I'd come back from Silver Spring. Relief. Belonging. The physical comfort of being exactly where you're supposed to be. They know our names, she said. I took her hand and walked her back to the house. That night, after she was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with Dana and said, "We have to talk about leaving." Dana was quiet for a long time. Leaving means taking her away from the only place she's ever felt completely at home, she said. Leaving means getting out before the attachment becomes permanent. What if it's already permanent? Then we push through it. Together. We get through the withdrawal and we start over somewhere and we deal with it. Dana looked at me, and what I saw in her face was not agreement or disagreement. It was a question I couldn't answer. What if she doesn't want to go? She's 6. She doesn't get to decide. Ethan. Listen to me. What if she doesn't want to go, and she's right? I didn't understand. What if the hollow is good? Dana said. What if it's genuinely, actually good? What if the settling and the breathing and the trees and the water and the sleep and the warmth are just what a healthy place feels like? What if we spent our whole lives in dead places and now we're in a living one, and the attachment isn't a trap, it's just how it works? And if it's not? Then show me the harm. Show me one injury. Show me one night Clem woke up frightened. Show me one moment any of us has been hurt. I couldn't. The insurance company can't find the house, I said. The insurance company paid the claim. The satellite imagery erases us. We're still here. I can't leave without feeling like I'm dying. So don't leave. She said it simply. Not as a concession. As an answer. September now. A full year. I'm writing this at the kitchen table at 5 in the morning. The smokehouse is closed. The water bowl is fresh. The windows upstairs are sealed. Clem is asleep and will sleep until 6:30. The hollow settled 3 hours ago. I have not decided to leave. I have not decided to stay. I am living in the space between those decisions, and the space is comfortable, and the comfort is the thing I trust least. Here is what I know. The hollow is alive. Not metaphorically. The 6 households are its maintenance crew, and our property is its heart, and the instructions, all of them, including the contradictions, are its operating requirements. The smokehouse opens and closes like a valve. The water on the porch is an offering. The tree line is a boundary that is also a membrane. The settling at night is its circulation. We are performing these functions because they need to be performed, and the hollow compensates us with comfort and health and belonging and sleep. I don't know what the hollow is. Virgil might know. The Combses might have known. The entity, the system, whatever it is, predates the road, predates the houses, predates the names. It accepted a community into itself, or a community grew around it, and over generations the two became inseparable. I know that Clem is more integrated than Dana and I are. I know that her integration is accelerating. I know that by the time she's old enough to choose for herself, the choice may not be meaningful, not because she'll be forced to stay, but because leaving will feel like amputation, and staying will feel like breathing, and no one chooses amputation over breathing. I know that the insurance company still can't find the house. I know that 2 more mapping services have updated their imagery and the house is absent from both. I know that the county still shows it, and our mortgage company still shows it, and the IRS still accepts our address. The systems closest to us see us. The systems farthest away do not. The circle of visibility is shrinking, and I don't know what happens when it closes. I know that Burl Felton told me last week that his grandmother once tried to sell the Felton place and moved to Elkins. The listing sat for 2 years. 3 buyers made offers. All 3 had their financing fall through. The appraisal kept coming back wrong, too low, then too high, then too low again. The house was never sold. His grandmother died in it. I know that no property in Harlan Hollow has changed hands to an outsider since 1931, when the Combses built our house. Until us. I know that Garnett Hayes, the listing agent who sold us this place, has not returned my last 4 calls. And I know that this morning, when I walked outside to check the smokehouse and refresh the water and read the hollow's weight the way I read it every morning now, automatically, fluently, the way you read the weather or a child's mood, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Down past the tree line, past the boundary that everyone agrees you shouldn't cross, there was a light. Not a flashlight. Not a fire. A window. Warm, yellow, steady. Like a house. I stood on the porch and looked at it, and the hollow settled, not at its usual time, not in its usual way, but right then, in response to my looking, a single slow breath, and the light remained. I don't know whose house that is. I don't know if it's a house at all. But Clem is going to see it too. probably today. She sees everything in this hollow before I do. And when she asks to go look, I'm not going to know what to say. Because the honest answer, the one the hollow has spent a year teaching me, is that there's nothing past the tree line that isn't already in us. That the boundary is a boundary the way a skin is a boundary, it marks where you end, but everything inside it is already yours. And the thing I can't determine, the thing that keeps me up at 5 in the morning writing this at a kitchen table in a house that half the world's mapping systems say doesn't exist, is whether that feeling is wisdom or whether it's the last thought you have before you stop being a person who can leave and start being a person who is part of the ground. The water bowl is full. The smokehouse is closed. The light past the trees is still on. Clem will be awake in 90 minutes. I don't know what we are becoming. But the hollow knows. And it is patient, and warm, and it has never once been wrong about what we need, and that is the most frightening sentence I have ever written. I reread that sentence 6 times before closing the laptop. Each time it felt more true and less mine, like a thought that had been placed on my tongue by someone else's hand. I deleted the file. Then I opened it from the autosave and read it again. At 6:30, Clem came downstairs. She was already dressed, jeans, rubber boots, her hair pulled back in the braid Dana had taught her to do herself. She poured a glass of milk from the refrigerator, drank it standing at the counter, and looked at me with that expression she'd been wearing more and more since midsummer. Not precocious. Not eerie. Settled. A 6-year-old who knew where she was. The smokehouse needs to be open early today, she said. I hadn't opened it yet. I'd been planning to wait until after breakfast, because the air was heavy and cool and the wait felt like a closed-door morning to me. But Clem said it with such clarity that I got up, walked across the yard in the thin fog, and swung the plank door open on its iron hinges. The air that came out was warm. Not residual warmth. Not the stored heat of a closed structure. Warm the way breath is warm. It moved past me and into the hollow, and I watched the fog pull apart along the ground in a line from the smokehouse toward the tree line, as if something had inhaled through the building and drawn the moisture out of the air. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. The warmth faded. The fog closed back in. The smokehouse was just a smokehouse again, blackened rafters, packed earth, the faint smell of decades-old creosote. When I turned around, Clem was on the porch, watching. See, she said. It needed to breathe. I nodded. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. That morning I drove down to the Felton place. Burl was in his garden, staking tomatoes even though September in the hollow was already edging toward cool. His bantam chickens scratched around his boots. He saw me coming and straightened up slowly, the way old men straighten, one vertebra at a time. The light passed the tree line, I said. He looked at me. You saw it. This morning. 5 a.m. Burl wiped his hands on his canvas pants and walked to his porch and sat in the metal chair by the door. I followed. He didn't invite me to sit, but I sat anyway, on the step. How long have you been seeing it? He asked. First time was this morning. He was quiet. A rooster crowed somewhere behind the house, a ragged, half-hearted sound, like it was going through the motions. Liddy saw it in her 3rd year, he said. Her mother saw it in her 4th. You're early. What is it? I don't know what it is. I know what Liddy said it was. I know what my grandmother said Liddy's mother said it was. None of those answers will satisfy you because none of them satisfied me. Tell me anyway. Liddy said it was the hollow showing you where it wants you to go next. Next. Deeper. I sat with that word for a moment. It lay in the air between us like something physical. Deeper into what? Into the hollow. Into the function. Liddy's mother maintained this end, he gestured vaguely up the road toward our house, for 40 years. When the light appeared, she started maintaining past the tree line too. She'd go through the trees every morning and come back every evening, and she never once said what was back there. Liddy took over the near maintenance and her mother took the far. When her mother died, Liddy tried to do both. And Liddy was alone for 11 years, and she died in her bed, and the hollow went unmaintained past the tree line for all of that time. And now you're here and the light is back. You're saying the hollow wants us to expand. Burl looked at me with an expression I can only describe as tired patience. I'm saying the hollow showed you a light, and the light means something, and I can't tell you what because I've never seen it. I maintain the Felton end. The water table. The drainage. I know my part. I don't know yours. I asked him if he'd ever tried to leave. He smiled for the first time in the conversation. I'm 4th generation. Where would I go? I drove home. Dana was in the kitchen canning tomatoes, a skill she'd learned from Glenda Harper in July and now performed with the fluency of someone who'd been doing it for decades. The kitchen smelled like vinegar and basil and the warm steam of processed fruit. It smelled like the house had always smelled this way. We need to talk about the light, I said. Dana set down the ladle. The one past the trees. You've seen it. Since Tuesday. This was Saturday. She'd been seeing it for 4 days and hadn't mentioned it. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't answer immediately. She turned back to the canning pot and adjusted the flame and fitted a lid onto a jar with the careful precision that the process requires. Then she said, because I knew what you'd do. You'd make a spreadsheet. You'd map it. You'd try to organize it into something you could analyze. And I don't think this one wants to be analyzed. What do you think it wants? I think it wants us to come look. And you don't find that concerning? She turned to face me. Her eyes were clear and direct and completely calm. Ethan, I've been concerned since December. I've been concerned since the first time the hollow settled and I felt my heart rate synchronize with it. I've been concerned since I realized I can't leave for more than 6 hours without feeling like my organs are in the wrong place. I'm past concerned. I'm in the part that comes after. What part is that? The part where you decide whether the place you're living is a place you're living in or a place that's living in you, and you realize the answer might be both, and both might be okay. I didn't respond to that. I went upstairs to my office and opened the laptop and pulled up the county GIS one more time. The house was still visible on the county's imagery. But I noticed something I'd missed before. The parcel boundaries, the red lines that marked the edges of our 87 acres, had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would be obvious to someone who hadn't been staring at these maps for months. But I had been staring at them, and I had screenshots from January for comparison, and the eastern boundary, the one that ran along the ridge above the tree line, had moved outward by maybe 200 feet. I measured it 3 times using the GIS tool's measurement function. The parcel had been 87.3 acres in January. It was now 89.1 acres. I checked the deed. The deed said 87.3 acres. The tax assessment said 87.3 acres. But the mapped boundary, the physical line that the county system drew around our land, enclosed 89.1. I called the county assessor's office. A woman named Pam answered. I identified myself and the parcel and asked about the boundary discrepancy. She typed for a moment. Then she said, I'm showing 89.1 acres. The deed says 87.3. Let me pull the deed record. More typing. A pause. Deed says 89.1. I have a copy of the deed. It says 87.3. I can only go by what's in the system, Mr. Pruitt. I pulled up my scanned copy of the deed. The number on the page said 89.1. I stared at it. I knew, I was certain, that when we'd closed on this property, the acreage was 87.3. I remembered Garnett saying the number. I remembered it on the listing. I remembered calculating the per acre price. But the document in front of me said 89.1. And the county said 89.1. And the GIS said 89.1. The property was growing. And every record was growing with it. I went to my spreadsheet. The one with the instructions. I scrolled to the bottom, where I'd been tracking my own generated practices, the secondary corollaries that had emerged from living here and paying attention. There were 78 entries now. I'd had 63 in August. I hadn't added any. I opened the version history. The spreadsheet was cloud-based, and every edit was logged with a timestamp and user. Every new entry was attributed to me. My account. My login. Timestamps corresponding to times I'd been at the computer. I didn't remember making them. I read through the new 15 entries. Entry 64, when the fog settles in the lower pasture before dawn, the east-facing windows should be cracked 2 inches regardless of season. Entry 65, the smokehouse door should be opened from the left side, not the right, when the temperature is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Entry 66, after rain, walk the fence line within 2 hours. Not to inspect it. To be seen walking it. Entry 67, Clem's boots should be left on the porch overnight when the moon is past half. Entry 68, standing water near the house after dark is acceptable if the water bowl on the porch has been refreshed within the hour. They continued. Each one specific. Each one procedurally grounded. Each one written in my voice, with my syntax, assigned to my account. I had no memory of typing any of them. But when I read them, each one felt right. Each one described something I'd been doing without documenting it, a practice I'd absorbed through living here and responding to the Hollow's cues. The spreadsheet hadn't been generating new entries. It had been recording what I was already doing, as if the document and I had merged into a single system and the documentation was automatic. I closed the laptop. I went downstairs. I walked out to the porch and sat in the chair and looked at the hollow. It was early afternoon. The light past the tree line wouldn't be visible until after dark. The hollow looked the way it always looked in September, green going gold at the edges, the creek audible from the east, the barn throwing its shadow across the near pasture. Ordinary. Beautiful. Home. A car I didn't recognize came up the gravel road. This was unusual. The road served only the 6 households, and I knew every vehicle in the hollow by sight and sound. This was a white sedan, late model, with state plates. It stopped at the base of our driveway. A woman got out. Mid-40s. Professional clothes, not business formal, but the kind of layered, practical outfit someone wears when they're visiting rural properties on a schedule. She had a clipboard and a lanyard with a photo ID. She walked up the driveway. I met her at the bottom of the porch steps. "Mr. Pruitt?" I said yes. She introduced herself as Carla Redding. She was from the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, specifically the State Historic Preservation Office. She said she was conducting a survey of properties in Braxton County that might qualify for the National Register of Historic Places, and that our farmhouse had been flagged in a recent review of pre-war vernacular architecture. I invited her in. She accepted. She spent 90 minutes in the house. She measured rooms. She photographed moldings, hardware, floor joists visible in the basement, the stonework of the foundation. She was thorough and knowledgeable, and she admired the house with the specific, practiced eye of someone who'd seen hundreds of similar structures and knew what made this one distinct. In the kitchen, she paused. "This is unusual," she said. She was looking at the southeast corner, where the exterior wall met the chimney mass. She ran her hand along the plaster. "What is the wall thickness here?" "It's 18 inches. The rest of the house is standard balloon frame with a 3.5-inch stud cavity. But this corner is 18 inches of solid material." She tapped it. The sound was dead, not hollow, not reverberant. Solid. That's not normal for this construction era. Or this construction type. I said I'd noticed the wall was cold there, even in summer. She nodded. "It's not insulation. The thermal mass of 18 inches of solid, whatever this is, would actually stabilize temperature, not insulate. This wall is doing something structural that the rest of the house isn't." She took additional photographs. She measured the corner from both sides and from the basement below. Then she looked at me with the expression professionals wear when they've found something interesting and don't yet know what it means. "Has anyone ever opened this wall?" I said, "Not to my knowledge. I'd be curious to see what's in there. Not from a preservation standpoint, we'd never recommend destructive investigation on a property this intact. But from a curiosity standpoint, that's a lot of wall for no apparent reason." She finished her survey. She left a card. She said the property was an excellent candidate for the register and that I'd receive formal correspondence in the coming weeks. After she left, I went back to the southeast corner. I pressed my palm against the plaster. It was cool. Not cold exactly, cool, the way creek water is cool on a hot day. Refreshing. Inviting. I knocked on it. Dead sound. Solid mass. 18 inches of something that wasn't framing and wasn't stone and wasn't plaster. I put my ear against it. The hollow was breathing. Not the nighttime settling, that was an ambient, atmospheric event. This was localized. Right here. In this wall. A slow, rhythmic compression that I felt against my cheek before I heard it. And under the rhythm, a warmth that wasn't thermal. A warmth that was, I don't have another word for this, emotional. The wall felt glad I was listening. I pulled away. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I wasn't frightened. And that absence of fear was, itself, the data point that should have frightened me most. That evening, after dinner, after Clem's bath, after her story, after she fell asleep at the usual time in the usual way with the usual completeness, I sat on the porch with Dana and told her about the wall. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Show me." We went to the southeast corner. She placed her palm where I'd placed mine. She was quiet for a long time. Then she pulled her hand away and looked at it as if checking for residue. "That's the hollow's heartbeat," she said. "You can't know that. I can feel it." Feeling it and knowing it aren't the same thing. In this house they are. I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. Or she was wrong in a way that was indistinguishable from being right, which is the same thing here. We went to bed. The hollow settled at its usual time. I lay awake and listened to it and tried to remember what it felt like to live somewhere that didn't breathe. I couldn't. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, 3 things have happened that I need to record because I don't trust that I'll remember them accurately if I wait. The first, the property is now 91.4 acres. I checked the GIS on Monday. I checked the deed. Both say 91.4. I no longer have any documentary evidence that it was ever 87.3. Every record has updated. Every file has changed. The property is growing and taking its history with it, and the growth is in the direction of the tree line. The boundary is extending past the old growth stand, claiming more of the ridge beyond. The second, the spreadsheet has 107 entries. 41 from the neighbors. 66 from me. Except I've only consciously added 22. The remaining 44 appeared under my name, in my voice, at timestamps that correspond to times I was seated at this table. They describe practices I perform daily. They are accurate. They are useful. They are not mine. The third, Clem went past the tree line. She didn't tell us. I found out because I was checking the GPS tracker on her watch, a concession to rural parenting, a device we'd put on her wrist in October and that she wore without complaint. On Thursday afternoon, while Dana was at the Harpers and I was on a client call, the tracker showed Clem's position moving through the old growth stand, past the boundary of our original parcel, and approximately 300 yards up the ridge. She was there for 47 minutes. Then the tracker showed her walking back. She came into the house, went upstairs, and was in her room when I came down from my office. I asked her what she'd been doing. "Playing in the barn," she said. The tracker said otherwise. But the tracker also said the property boundary now extended past where she'd walked, which meant she'd technically never left our land. I asked her again. Carefully. Not accusatory. "Clem, were you past the tree line today?" She looked at me. Not guilty. Not defiant. Patient. The way you look at someone who's asked a question they already know the answer to. "The trees are on our land, Daddy. Were you past the trees?" "On the other side." "There isn't another side. It's all the same place." I sat down on her bed. Her room smelled like pine and grass and the faint sweetness that I'd come to associate with the Hollow's good days, the days when everything was balanced and the maintenance was running smoothly and the house felt most like a living thing's resting pulse. "What's back there, Clem?" She pulled a piece of paper from under her pillow. A drawing. Colored pencil on white paper, the kind her school sent home in her backpack. It showed a house. Not our house. A different house, deeper in the hollow, surrounded by trees, with a yellow window. A woman stood in the doorway. She had no face, not in the way children sometimes omit faces, but deliberately. The space where the face should have been was colored in with the same yellow as the window, as if the woman and the light were made of the same thing. "She says she's been waiting," Clem said. I took the drawing. My hands were shaking again. Waiting for what? For us to be ready. I've spoken to Virgil once more since then. I drove to his trailer yesterday morning. He was sitting outside in a lawn chair, looking at the tree line, which is visible from every property in the hollow. I'd never realized that before, but it is. The trees are visible from every single house, as if the hollow is oriented around them the way a body is oriented around a spine. I showed him Clem's drawing. He held it in both hands and studied it for a long time. "The woman," he said. "Do you know who she is?" My grandfather talked about a woman past the trees. He said she'd been there since before his grandfather. He said she's the one who planted them. Planted the old growth stand. Planted the hollow. He handed the drawing back. "Your girl is the first child born outside the hollow who's been accepted this completely. The Combses were all born here. My family was born here. The Feltons go back to the 1800s. None of us came from outside. You did. What does that mean?" "It means the hollow learned something from you that it didn't know before. How to bring someone in. How to make outside feel like inside. It practiced on you and Dana, and it perfected the process on Clem. And now it's inviting us past the tree line. It's inviting Clem. You and Dana are invited because Clem is." I sat in the lawn chair next to him. The morning was clear and bright and the hollow was gorgeous, the turning leaves, the mist in the lower pasture, the red-tailed hawk that circled above the ridge every morning at exactly 9:15, as punctual as any clockwork. "If we go," I said. "If we walk through the trees and find whatever's there. What happens?" Virgil looked at the tree line. His pale eyes reflected the light. "I think the property gets bigger again," he said. "And I think some mapping system somewhere stops being able to find you. And I think it feels wonderful, because everything the hollow does feels wonderful, and I think that's exactly why you should be careful." "You sound like you're warning me." "I'm telling you what I see. I see a family that moved in a year ago and is already deeper than the Feltons got in 4 generations. I see a child who hears the trees and follows a light and brings home drawings of a woman nobody alive has ever met. I see a man who maintains this hollow better than Liddy ever did, who writes instructions in his sleep, whose land grows while the world forgets his house exists." He paused. "And I see that you love it here. Both of you. All 3 of you. The love is real. That's what makes it hard. If the hollow was cruel, you'd leave. If it was frightening, you'd have left in December. But it's not cruel. It's generous. It gives you everything you need and asks for work in return, and the work feels like purpose. That's not a trap. A trap hurts. This is something else." "What?" "I don't know. I've been here my whole life and I don't know. I just know that my grandfather went past the tree line once and he came back and he never spoke about it and he never went again and he lived here peacefully until he died at 94. And Liddy's mother went past and stayed past for years." "Yes." "And she maintained something there." "Yes. And when she died and the maintenance stopped, the light went out." "Yes. And now the light is back." Virgil stood up. His joints cracked. He looked old and clear-eyed and neither afraid nor at peace, just present, the way the hollow is present, with a patience that is indistinguishable from permanence. "I can't tell you what to do," he said. "I can tell you that every person who's lived in that house has faced this. And every one of them made a different choice. And the hollow accepted every choice. It doesn't punish. It doesn't force. It just asks, and the asking feels like home, and eventually the answer feels like it was always yes. I drove back up the road. I pulled into the driveway. The house was there, white clapboard, metal roof, deep porch, the smokehouse beside it with its door open because the air was light and warm and the hollow needed to breathe. Dana was on the porch. Clem was on the porch beside her, cross-legged, drawing. I parked and sat in the car for a while. I looked at the house that half the world can't see. I looked at my wife and daughter, who have never been healthier or happier or more at home. I looked at the tree line, which is not a barrier but an invitation, and which has been waiting, according to Virgil's best accounting, for longer than any living memory can reach. I know what I'm supposed to do. The rational thing. The cautious thing. Pack the car. Pull Clem out of school. Drive to Silver Spring and push through the withdrawal and sell the house to the next buyer and start over in a place that doesn't settle at night or grow beneath your feet or write your instructions for you while you sleep. But I don't know if there will be a next buyer. I don't know if the listing agent will answer his phone. I don't know if the insurance company will recognize the house long enough to transfer the policy. I don't know if the satellite imagery will show a structure or an empty field. I don't know if, by the time the listing goes live, the systems that still see us will have caught up with the ones that don't. And I don't know if Clem will come. Not because she'll be held here. Virgil was right, the hollow doesn't hold anyone. The road goes both directions. But Clem has heard the tree speak and followed the light and met the woman with no face and brought home a drawing that shows a house I haven't seen yet but that exists on land I apparently own, according to every document I can access, including the one in my hands that I'm certain said 87.3 acres 10 months ago and now says 91.4 and will probably say something larger tomorrow. This morning I woke at 4:12. The hollow had already settled. The house was warm. The water bowl on the porch was full, though I hadn't filled it before bed. The smokehouse door was closed, which was correct for the temperature. The upstairs windows were sealed. Everything in order. Everything maintained. I checked the spreadsheet. 111 entries now. The 4 new ones describe practices for maintaining something past the tree line. I didn't write them. But I understand them. And tomorrow morning, or the morning after, or the morning after that, I'm going to pick up a jar of water and a broom and whatever else the instructions say to bring, and I'm going to walk past the trees and find the house with the yellow window, and I'm going to do what the Combses did and what Virgil's grandfather turned away from and what my daughter has already done without asking permission. Not because the hollow is making me. Because the hollow is right. The work needs doing. The light has been off for too long. The woman has been waiting. And because Clem will be beside me, and she won't be afraid, and her lack of fear will feel like proof, and I will not be able to tell whether it is. The property was 87.3 acres when we bought it. It's 91.4 now. By the time anyone reads this, if the systems that can still see us hold long enough to transmit it, I expect it will be larger. I expect the house will still be here. I expect no satellite will show it. I expect the water will taste perfect and the smokehouse will breathe on schedule and my daughter will sleep soundly and the hollow will settle every night, one slow breath, patient and warm, and every mapping system on Earth will look at this valley and see nothing but trees and grass and an empty field where a family used to be. The instructions say to leave the door open today. I'm going to follow them. I always do.